Hello, everyone. This is Attorney General Keith Ellison with Affording Your Life, your podcast about fairness, justice, and consumer information. This is not legal advice, but important information you can use to help you afford your life. So today, let me introduce to everybody a young person who I was so thrilled to meet only a few weeks ago. She's facing some challenges, but she ain't letting it get her down. Nazaria McKinley. How you doing, young lady?
I am good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Tell everybody about who you are a little bit.
I am a 17-year-old, and I go to high school for recording arts. I like drawing, and I am currently facing homelessness.
Yeah.
With my mom.
Yeah, and you have your mom's here today, and ma'am, you're clearly a hardworking woman. You love your family, you love your daughter, and yet you're faced with the challenge of making sure everybody has a roof over their head every night, and that's not easy, is it?
No. Closer. No, it's not.
Talk about the challenges.
Oh, it's a number of them. The main challenge, I would say, is to getting my housing right now is the finances.
The money.
The money. I got sick, so because I got sick and I accumulated bills, I created more debt. And that's hindering me.
So on this podcast, sometimes we ask people questions that aren't that polite because it ain't our business, but I do have to ask you, what was your illness that you were facing?
They never found out.
But
I think it was induced stress.
Oh, sure.
I got a concussion on the job.
So you got hit in the head, or you fell?
I was a machine operator.
Sure.
Okay, I made boxes. Not a fun job, but it paid the bills. I hit my head. I started to get treated unfairly, and I started to speak out about it. In turn, they put me on medication, 3 different types of medication. Halfway through this process, I started to have a swelling in my stomach, so I started going to the doctors. They could not find out what was wrong with me. I think it was stress. That was literally killing me. And so I had to make a choice. It was either my job or it was me leaving to get my health right.
Well, and so are you in the workforce now, or are you looking for work?
Right now, I'm unemployed.
Recovering.
I'm recovering. I just had surgery 2 months ago on my knee.
Sure.
And so I'm just trying to keep my mental state together and still trying to focus on this housing thing, but there's barriers.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about them a little bit more. But I just want to say, Nazaria, how does it make you feel to see your mom, going through all these challenges and stuff like this? How does it impact you?
I wouldn't say that it makes me sad, but it makes me fairly angry because I know that I can't help her the way I want to.
Right.
Like, I know I can't just go out and get a job how I want to, how everybody else can, because one, my age, and I can't go work at a warehouse or do overnights or anything because I have to go to school. I have to finish school.
Right.
That's my main priority, getting in the house and finishing school. Then a job can come after, but a job would help. I know it would help because if my mom wouldn't be able to work, I would be able to work. And either way, we'll make something happen. I know that.
That's really wise that you would prioritize school, because you can go through a few months where it's kind of tough, or you can go through that tough time now and then make sure that you graduate so that you can have an easier time later.
Yeah, but what I realize is sometimes going to school, it can help you. It helps you in the long run, of course, but it won't help me. They don't give me a for sure place to sleep at night. I know that. They are giving me lunch and breakfast, but they're not making sure I'm to and from school half of the time. My school I was just at, they gave me a bus card only if I was attending school. If I missed a certain day when we were able to get bus cards, I wasn't able to get it.
And so that's the reality why some kids drop out, huh?
Yeah, not being able to get there.
Well, we want you to stick with it, but we recognize that it's not easy.
No, it's not.
So, Ann McInerney, you are the supervisor of Project Reach, Fostering Connections. and you're in the business of trying to help folks who are trying to help themselves.
That's right.
What motivates you to do what you do?
Well, I do feel really strongly that anybody should have access to education any way that we can get them there, and a quality education. So we know that there are students and families that are up against some adversity, some barriers, but it's our job as the McKinney Vento Liaison to make sure we can get them to school and try to support them as much as we can.
And that sounds great, but what is that? I mean, the reality is that we're here with a mother and a daughter who are struggling. Mm-hmm. And from your standpoint, what does it all look like? What does that look like on the ground?
Sure.
What do people listening to this show need to know about the struggles that you face to make sure that Nazaria and her mother can be successful?
Yeah. So under federal law, McKinney Vento, the students and families that are experiencing homelessness have certain rights. One of them includes being able to enroll in school without documentation, so without their immunization records, without transcripts, because we know that students and families that are experiencing homelessness don't always keep those documents readily available in order to enroll. We also, they automatically qualify for free and reduced lunch, or actually free lunch, excuse me. We, as a public school, have to provide transportation for the students to stay in their school of origin. What we recognize is that the more students can stay stable in their school, where they've developed relationships, where they have some meals, where they know people, their peers and teachers, other people that support them, our goal is to get them to stay in school, attend school regularly, and help with their stability, even though their housing may not be stable.
And how long you been doing this?
This is my 6th year.
How's it going? You sound like you're very clear on what the law requires. Do people fall through the cracks sometimes?
Absolutely, yes. We do see people that fall through the cracks. We see families that have been identified as experiencing homelessness, not being able to get the resources that they need, not being able to get into shelter because of the shelters are full and there's a wait list, not being able to get into housing because of other barriers, whether it's evictions and unlawful detainers or criminal history. There are a lot of barriers, and that's why we keep going and trying to reduce those barriers and break them down and try to get everybody into housing and to school.
So Nazaria, she stayed in school, but she was real eloquent in saying what the challenges were. Mm-hmm. And I just want to ask you quickly, Nazaria, has it ever occurred to you, and I'm glad you didn't do it, but has it ever occurred to you that maybe you just don't need to be in school? Have you thought about dropping out? Well, that's good.
It's been times where I've just woken up and just not wanted to go to school because it's just like the stressors. It's way more than just going to school. It's the schoolwork on top of, not the people, because I try not to let people distract me, but it's more of my family. I tend to not, worry. I tend to worry about other people more than myself half the time. So. Yeah.
Ann, do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, I was going to say that we see that from a lot of our students. Actually, the state of Minnesota, there was a study that was recently done with Schoolhouse Connections. It's based in D.C., and they just did a study on 26 different states and their graduation rates. And Minnesota actually has only a 45% graduation rates of students that are experiencing homelessness. So I think that as a state, we have to realize that some of the challenges and the reasons why students aren't graduating, it might have to do with wanting to work. It has to do for sure with housing. It has to do with staying in school, staying connected to the people that they know, and passing classes, accumulating their credits, and having enough to graduate.
So good housing policy is good education policy.
Absolutely.
So, Joe Nathan, you've been out here in the fields for many years. You're a researcher, you're an academic, you study these things, and you also get your hands into it, too. You don't just stay up in an ivory tower offering observations. You get in the middle of it. What do we need to know about this situation when it comes to youth homelessness, education, and, moms like Nadia just trying to, put it together every day without much help, in my opinion.
Mr. Attorney General, thank you so much for doing
Everybody
this.
calls me Keith around here.
Okay. So, Keith, 3 quick things that I think are important to know. First of all, we're dealing with some really brave young people and a very brave mother that I've gotten to know really well. And I think it's important for folks in Minnesota to understand this is not just an issue for Minneapolis-St. Paul. This is an issue for people throughout the state of Minnesota. The research shows that about 1/3 of the homeless youngsters in the state and the families, about 1/3 of them are in greater Minnesota, about 1/3 of them in the suburbs, and about 1/3 of them in Minneapolis-St. Paul. So I think
Wait a
that's
minute. We were led to believe this is just a urban problem.
Yes, sir, and I actually met with some bankers.
That ain't true?
Not at all. Not at all. 2/3 of the homeless people in Minnesota live either in the suburbs or in greater Minnesota.
And we also are led to believe this is just a people of color problem. Is that true?
Not at all true. Not at all true. There certainly are higher percentages of African American and American Indians, but there are thousands of homeless white people in the state. And as we heard earlier, this can happen for a variety of reasons. It can happen because there's a fall. It can happen because there's an illness. It can happen when people lose
Healthcare,
their
injury
jobs.
on the job.
So it can happen, frankly, to almost anybody. And we have to, I think, as a state, if we're going to make progress in education, we have to recognize that this has got to be one of the top priorities, because if you have a home, then you can have a stable job, then you can have good health. We have, as a part of the district charter, community groups, city council members that are a part of this coalition that you've invited to participate in this. We have also a person from Health Partners who's pointed out that the health impact on homelessness is enormous. And so if we're going to cut our health care costs, if we're going to deal with graduation rates, if we're going to have more people paying taxes, central to all of these things
Let's house some people.
is this issue. Central to all of these issues is the homelessness and homing issue.
Well, Councilmember Jane Prince is here with us today, and I can sympathize with you, Councilmember, because at the end of the day, when you're elected to do a job, you don't get to always theorize on why or how come or what's the history of it. All that stuff's nice to know, but you got to deliver housing.
Yeah.
But talk to me about what you're facing and what you're trying to get done on the St. Paul City Council.
Thank you, Keith. Well, one thing I want to say is I want to thank Joe Nathan and the community organization that he brought together to say to the city council, you need to listen to the people who are experiencing homelessness.
Sure.
I think what makes this group unusual is it's a coalition of district and charter schools, as well as the city and county. And what makes it special is that we have among us people who are experiencing homelessness, families and kids. And so it's not theoretical when we get together. We're hearing directly from people who are going through it. And so one of the concerns I've had since I've been on the council in 2016 is that we really fell behind since the early 2000s in building housing that was affordable for low-wage workers.
Right.
We focused somewhat on supportive housing with the construction in St. Paul by Catholic Charities of Higher Ground. But Higher Ground serves individual homeless people, of which there is also a large number and not an adequate number of shelter beds. But what I discovered when Joe came forward with this issue and when I met Ann McInerney from the St. Paul district is that almost 1,972 students reported experiencing homelessness in the 2018-19 school year. And that just knocked me over. That we don't see that problem. And I believe among policymakers, until very recently, we didn't understand that it was that serious of an issue. We have Project Home in Ramsey County in St. Paul that provides shelter for about 40 people, families per night. 40 doesn't begin to scratch the surface. It's a wonderful program, but it's a shelter program. And then the county also has a hotel motel voucher program that provides short-term assistance for people going through homelessness. But the problem of 1,972 kids representing almost 2,400 family members is they're couch hopping, they're sleeping in cars. I don't want to use the word invisible because Nazaria has really seized on the idea that we're not invisible. But for policymakers, the extent of this problem has not been recognized. And so what is so wonderful about you having us here for this podcast and you're connecting with our group is this gives us a chance to really put a spotlight on this problem so that we can come together as a community at all levels of state, city, and county government to try to solve it.
Well, let me just say, from the Attorney General's standpoint, I don't really write the law, but I do enforce it. Mm-hmm. And historically, attorneys general have not really done that much in the housing space. I'm not even faulting them. It's just, somehow we haven't seen tenants and consumers as the same. We're challenging that notion. We're trying to do something about that. We're bringing lawsuits in the cities. We're bringing them in greater Minnesota. There are some trailer park communities, what I like to call manufactured housing communities. And there are some urban communities, and we're doing something about it, making sure that the laws are obeyed. But I tell you one thing, I was in Congress for 12 years, and it always blew me away when we'd have around tax day, we talk about the mortgage interest deduction. We talk about all the federal programs, mostly tax cut programs, for people who own homes. These programs cost near $100 billion a year. And the whole budget of HUD, the entire budget of HUD, somewhere in the neighborhood of $41 billion a year. So what we give to upper middle class people who own homes, like myself, is way more than we give to a mom who is trying to keep an apartment together, making $11 an hour. Heaven forbid she gets hit in the head by a box. Mm-hmm. Heaven forbid she gets stressed out. The policy's wrong. We used to invest in public housing. We don't invest in public housing. I think the government should just straight up go make housing. Right. Just make some housing. And yet, the headwinds to do that are very stiff, as you well know, mm-hmm. Councilmember. I want to talk about what we're going to do about it. But let me just jump back to Nadia for a minute. So Nadia, could you just talk about your situation a little bit? I mean, you have this smart, talented, kind young woman who's your daughter, and any parent can tell you that it's a blessing to have an awesome kid, even when they get on your nerves, as all kids do get on their parents' nerves sometimes. But we love them, and they're here because we just love them. But what is it like for you trying to make a living? Would you mind telling us some of the details of your life? Like, would I be being too forward? And
I'm an honest person.
Well, I know you're honest.
I'm gonna keep it all the way real with you.
well, yeah, I know you're honest, but when we're trying to help change the system, mm-hmm. sometimes, Joe Nathan said being brave. Telling your story is exposing yourself more than sometimes you would want to.
Exactly.
But given that we're trying to make a dent,
we gotta speak out.
We gotta speak out.
Right.
How old are you, if you don't mind?
I'm 42.
And how many children do you have?
I have 4 children.
When you were working as a box maker, mm-hmm. How much were they paying you per hour?
I started at $13.35, and I had to fight to get the rest of my money, which ended up leaving at $16.97.
That's about $32,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And with 4 kids, that's tight.
Yeah.
Would we get up and fight for 15? We're only talking about a $30,000 a year.
Right.
We're not talking about a whole lot of money. So did you have benefits with that job?
No, I didn't.
When did you have to get there in the morning?
7 o'clock.
How did Nazaria and the other kids get to school?
She had a bus that came to the corner right by where we lived at.
What time?
What was it? 7:45.
So Nazaria is not on the mic, but she said 7:45. So she actually had to leave. You had to
leave before her.
Right.
Most
So
of the
you
time.
couldn't make sure she got on the bus.
No.
Yeah.
I was sure of it.
Yeah.
I always made sure I was on the bus in the morning,
Yeah, and you know,
or my big brother would make sure.
but here's the thing about that, Nazaria. You're a good girl, and yet I know other good girls who might not quite get to the bus if mom's not there to make sure that
I was one of those.
you know what I mean.
Real.
Kids are, if you got 4 kids, you know that us parents, we don't make them. They come out how they come out. And I got my oldest son, he's a certain way. My second son, his name's Jeremiah. When he was a little boy, we called him Terramiah.
Yeah.
Because that's how he was. He was a high-spirited young man. And then we got my son Elijah. He's a very serious guy. He doesn't talk too much, but when he says something, he sure means it. And then we got Amira, who we can't get her to stop talking. She got views on everything. And so they're all different, right? And so you made it to that bus, thank heavens. But our society cannot be based solely on kids who do the right thing when nobody's looking. We got to have a society that works for a broad range of personality types, right? And so what time would you get off work?
Typically, I get home about 4 o'clock.
Okay, so that's good.
Well, I lived right down the street. It was a blessing, the job that I got.
So is that the only job you had?
For the most part, I've had 42 years. I think I've had about 6 different jobs. Housekeeping. I've worked in, I'm a laborer, hands-on pretty much. So housekeeping, warehouse. But my earlier profession, I was on the wrong road, so I was like my own entrepreneur.
Got you.
Yeah, so I didn't have a lot of work history.
Yeah. So
This was my really biggest one, the last one. 4 years I was there. And I fought to get in that job. So, yeah.
yeah,
Not much work history. Didn't finish school.
Yeah.
So that's why I do press the issue with all of my children.
Well, let me just say this: 42 is young compared to me. I'm like 56, man. I'm up there, way up there. And I'm just saying that if you find a way to get some adult ed, you might just want to go ahead and knock it out.
I thought about it. I mean, I've
Don't keep
I've
thinking
been
about it.
going back. I went back a couple more times, and like stresses of life and things that I've had to endure, I put that off. There's a lot of things I put off that I probably should have went for it, but
keep that as a dream because
Yeah.
42 is pretty young.
Oh, yeah.
And keep that as a dream because I'm gonna tell you, once you get that paper, man, it's gonna make you feel good.
yeah, my mom always says that.
And it's also gonna, you're also gonna be setting, you're gonna be showing Nazaria something. Learning is a lifelong thing.
Oh, most definitely is.
You know what I mean? You stop learning when they box you up.
That's right.
And plant you.
That's right.
You
I was
know?
just telling her that before you came in here. Yeah, it doesn't stop,
Yeah, it's
and
true.
I ain't gonna stop. So
And I can tell you're a person who likes learning.
yeah,
You
I
like
do.
to know new things.
Yeah, I do.
Yes, and you're obviously very smart because you're pulling it together on very. I mean, it's easy to do. It's easy to make a life for yourself and your family when you got plenty of resources.
Right.
When you got to be clever about it, that takes some smarts right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah.
Keith, to this point about Nadia's job and in her life, I happen to be 65, so definitely, Nadia, think about going back to school. 'Cause I went to law school when I was 50.
There you go.
And I'm really glad I did. But what I want to say is when I was growing up, one job, Nadia's job,
One job.
would have been enough for her to have a house or some kind of an apartment, wheels, health care,
Yep.
enough to eat.
And
There-
retirement.
And retirement, exactly. And we've gotten out of whack in our country. And when we go back to the early 80s, we had a president who decided to stop building that public housing. And he also decided to stop providing mental health care to all the people who
Absolutely.
were being cared for through federal funds. And that has gotten us to this point where we don't have enough housing. We have too many homeless people. And now the homeless problem affects the people who are, the American dream always included kids in school
Oh, yeah.
before. We've got to get back to being able to guarantee that somebody who works for a living like Nadia and her family get to have a place to live. And I'll just say one more thing while I have the mic.
Absolutely.
You know, I hear often, because housing is really expensive to build,
Yeah.
and I often hear somebody say in some kind of a public setting, well, we can't build our way out of homelessness. And I just jump up and...
How else are we gonna get out of it?
Exactly. We are not... It is really important to note in this conversation that we are not building enough housing to have a healthy housing market at any income level in our city. And our population is now up, we're the highest population, I think, ever at 313,000. So we do have to start building. We need market rate. We need to build housing that's subsidized. We need to work with nonprofit developers, and we need to get philanthropy back into housing. For 25 years, the McKnight Foundation funded the Family Housing Fund and created programs in which the two cities were kind of told in no uncertain terms, we'll give you these millions of dollars, but it's got to be housing people at lower income levels, and they need to be able to be stable and successful. So we need to bring philanthropy back to the table in a big way. And I'm not suggesting that McKnight's done anything wrong. I think we have to look to our philanthropic community to step back up again so that we can ensure housing for everyone.
I hear you making a general call. I hear you
am.
calling on the federal government, state government, city government. I hear you calling on philanthropy, private sector. I hear you calling on everybody to invest in housing. Housing's good medicine. Housing's good education policy. So one thing I want to explore is that both Nadia, you and Nazaria mentioned stress. We often don't talk about the psychological impact of housing instability. Could you all talk a little bit about that? I mean, talk to me about when you're feeling that stress. I mean, does it infect your sleep? Does it?
It's like you want to scream, but you can't because you're worried about if somebody else is going to feel some type of way, how they're going to feel about how you feel, and you're worried about how they're feeling, if that makes any sense.
It makes sense.
Yes, it affects sleep a lot, really.
Does it affect your ability to be patient? You know what I'm saying? Talk about that a little bit. I mean, one thing I know is when I feel stressed, when I'm feeling good and sleep and everything seems okay, if something crazy happens, I'm a lot more likely to say, no big deal. Mm-hmm. But then when I'm feeling the stress and something crazy happens, then I might lose it a little bit. You know what I mean? Can you talk about that? I mean, I just want people to know how you feel about how it feels a little bit, because some people listening will know exactly how it feels, but then other people listening, they might not have a clue. So, Nadia, you want to jump in here? I mean, in some ways, the weight's on your shoulders a lot too, because you're the one who's the
It's
parent.
great. Stress can affect you in a multitude of ways. It can affect your body with pains. I've experienced tremendous amount of pain from just stress. Lack of sleep, lack of not eating right. Of course, that all comes with being homeless.
Does it make you more easily susceptible to a cold or a flu or something like that?
Oh yeah, most definitely. You get sick. I mean, if you're not feeding your body properly, you're not getting your proper sleep. When you sleep, you heal.
Right.
Whatever is going on, it heals. It helps. But you don't have that when you're homeless. So it's like she said. Sometimes I just want to scream. You know, me, I've resorted more to praying. I'm trying to meditate more to try to stay grounded, stay focused on the bigger picture, which is what we're speaking about today. The stress, concentration, it affects your concentration. I've seen in my daughter that the stress can keep her where she's not wanting to go to school. She's depressed. She wants to sleep. You know, stress will do a number of things. You want to say something?
Yeah. It actually really does affect me when I don't sleep because I don't want to go to school. I don't want to get up and like go babysit because I babysit all the time, like for my sister, for family friends, and it makes me not want to do it. I love kids and I love school. It's not a day when my mom she wouldn't have to wake me up because I would be up before her half the time when I would want to go to school. And it's not like that for me no more. It's more like when I wake up, it's like I know if I don't do it, it's never going to get done.
That spirit, by the way, Keith, has led Nazaria and 2 other young people from St. Paul to be hired by Youth Prize, which is a local foundation.
All
and they're
right.
going to be bringing them together with a number of foundations, both here in Minnesota and around the country. So their leadership and their courage has been recognized. But I want to say one other thing. I think that this podcast is going to be broadcast sometime in November. And a lot of people in the holiday season are going to see or think about the Christmas Carol. And they're going to think,
Right.
oh, well, you know, that was then and this is now. And we've got all this progress. And we certainly have made a lot of progress. Having said that, we have gone from about 15,000, almost 18,000 youngsters in the state of Minnesota. As I said earlier, a third in rural, a third in the metro, a third in rural, a third in the suburbs, a third in Minneapolis, St. Paul, that are in this situation. And many of them really want to do well, as this young woman does. But we as a society, it seems to me, if we're investing in ourselves, as well as these young people and these families, we need to recognize our healthcare costs are going up, and everybody's talking about it, and they're talking about the cost of insulin and other things, which are real issues, and you've worked on that, which is great. But if we're going to talk about healthcare costs, we have to talk about healthier people. And
Yeah.
one of the central elements of healthier people is that they have a home. So when Jane talks about the government investing in homes, I think that's exactly the right word. This is not a handout. This is a way for Nadia and Nazaria to have a stable situation so their health improves, their job situation improves. They are going to be more able to contribute in terms of taxes, in terms of all kinds of other positive things to this country and to this state if we can get this housing thing right.
Nadia?
I think that it's a very important because they are our future. The children are our future. And if you want, I look at my grandkids, I look at my children, and if we want it to be better, then something has to be done now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be total chaos. And I wouldn't even say a couple more years. It's getting ready to be wintertime. I'm back out homeless again, no home, bouncing, So it's important. If people want to think about it, think about your future. What
Right.
do you want running the world? Do you want these kids out here that don't have no structure, no stability, no support, no nothing? They're they're invisible, but they're not. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, I'm looking at the bigger picture, the whole. We need to help one another. If this world was founded on God and God we trust, then you should be helping thy neighbor. You shouldn't be kicking us while we're down. These are our future. Our kids, if they don't get the proper things that they need, they won't be successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, look, we're about at the end of our time on the podcast. I want to say thank you to all of you who are working on this. Everybody here is working on this problem in a critical way. I just want to say, Nazaria, you as a 17-year-old, speaking up, using your voice, learning how to advocate, you're doing your part to address this issue. Nadia, as a working mom, struggling with dealing with housing and stuff, you're doing your part. You're not just waiting on somebody to help you out. You're helping yourself out and people in your situation. And I just would say, and you're doing your thing. You're over here working hard, supervisor, Project Reach, fostering connections. And of course, Joe, being a person who makes sure that policymakers, like our council member, have good information that they can use to make good policy critical to this. And you're sort of a scholar advocate, both kind of. And then, you as well, Councilmember Prince, I just want to say thank you for your commitment. You truly have taken your social justice commitment and put yourself in a position where you can make the rules, which is super important. And so I'll just say, any final comments before we tune out today?
I have a quick one. I just want to say that I came across a young homeless man, and speaking of the Project Reach staff, Ann has an incredible team of social workers,
Way to
and
go.
they are doing some amazing work with this young man, and I wanted to put in another thanks for Ann and her program.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann. And I think Nadia and Nazaria, you're going to take us out. But Nazaria, I got to ask you something before you go. Tell us about your dreams a little bit. Last time we were together, you were talking about your dreams, and I want people to hear them a little bit.
My dreams are to be happy in life, and that being said, I mean by exploring and adventuring in different areas and not just in one spot. I want to go everywhere and be a voice for stuff like this and like anything, not just this, but to be able to speak on anything that I think is important. I want to, I like drawing, so I want to make art that speaks to people.
Well, it's been an honor to get to know you. And by the way, I'm going to be at your school pretty soon. The Center for Recording Arts, we're having a expungement fair to help people get their records dealt with. Nadia, I think you got the last word.
I just like to say that I feel honored to be in this situation. Not in this situation, but here to be able to be a voice for people that won't stand up. We have a group. Our group is UFA, United for Action for Youth and Family Homelessness.
United for Action.
United for Action. That's what I'm about, and that's what I'm going to stand for.
Y'all don't see this, but I'm telling you that Nadia had her hand outstretched in a victory pose, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, hey, look, this is Keith Ellison. I'm your Attorney General in the state of Minnesota, and we've been talking with an awesome group of leaders about housing, the importance of addressing housing in our community. So we'll see you next time on Affording Your Life. Thank you very much. Hey, everybody, this is Attorney General Keith Ellison with Affording Your Life, the show about fairness, justice, and consumer information. We're not distributing legal advice here. If you have a legal problem, either call us or contact an attorney. Check in and see us next time on Affording Your Life with Attorney General Keith Ellison. Thank you very much.